Keeping Up with the Targaryens has just recently ended, and I have to say, it got a bad taste out of my mouth that Game of Thrones left, especially with season 7 and 8. Now, this isn't to say that this wasn't flawless. The time skipping made it feel like I was always missing something when it came to character progression and storytelling. However, with attention to detail when it came to the writing and camera focusing on similes and metaphors, taking shots further than they needed to be. This show was definitely something that I would recommend and stepped up when it had big shoes to fill. Now I'm going to go into some spoiler territories, but if you haven't seen House of Dragons, I definitely recommend it. Go check it out. Now, I already said, like before, that the time skips were a big issue for me, and I think a lot of other people's as well. I think what the time skips do, and really this was the major flaw of the show, is that it progresses the story in a way that probably didn't help with the characters. When it's a show that's very character driven and we have a tight knit cast, a lot smaller group of people that we're following than we were in Game of Thrones, it gets kind of weird whenever some of the side characters kind of just get their actions shown and then the consequences later. And for example, like Kristen Cole is shown murdering people in a large audience, but the next time we see him after a post time skip, he's just fine with nothing really happening to him. We didn't really get to see the full story behind that. Now, even though his story in particular doesn't necessarily affect the main plot, we do have someone like Lady Baela of Targaryen, I think. Yep, Lady Baela Targaryen, who's kind of pivotal in moving things along, and we get to see her go from being a kid to an adult to having kids of herself and even marrying a main side character, Daemon Targaryen. But because of the time skip, we don't really learn anything about her, and they have this huge death scene for her that isn't all that impactful or is what you might think it should be. Now, other than that, the writing is phenomenal. I think even though there isn't crazy amounts of camera work, they do a great job in attention to detail. Focusing on the things early on in the season, like the mice running through the halls of the castle, kind of showing what corruption and plots are going on. And Viserys is the first and only person to see it, but by the time he does see the corruption lurking on in his own household, it's a bit too late. And moving forward, speaking of the Targaryens, and the reason why I made the bit that I did starting off this review is it is just a small group of just the Targaryens and the families, and kind of the families directly connected to Targaryens. And it is nice. I do like the drama that ensues, and we do follow the main characters a little more closely. Then we do a great big, overarching moving, jumping from one side of the continent to another side of the continent. And as Game of Thrones has always been good at telling its character stories, I did enjoy this. I did enjoy following and learning the intricacies and kind of the details of every person. However, going back to the time skips, there is a point where Princess Rhaenyra and also Alicent of Hightower, they get switched. Their actresses, get swapped. And there was a part of me that really kind of missed. It's hard because you kind of grow attached to an actor and their performance and how they portray that character, and you don't really ever really want to see someone else play that character, unless I guess you're watching Doctor Who. But there's kind of like a tradition that each of those actors portray it differently. But that's beside the point. You get attached to an actor because they're playing a character, and that I think that's synonymous with the story. So it gets kind of weird when you get through halfway through the season and then you have a different actress playing because of the time skipping. It can feel a little jarring, but I think they did a good job in progressing that. I think that might have hurt it a little bit. However, again, because the story is written so well and because of the attention to detail, I can go further into that, like with Viserys, who was really one of the greatest characters in the show, played by Paddy Considine. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, but the real actors really step up and just showing how Viserys gets physically weak and ill, anytime he has to do something violent, is just a metaphor, a portrayal of how he is a peaceful king, and how him being a peaceful king is not only tearing down himself, but tearing down his kingdom. And a lot of different things are shown as similes or metaphors or even just foreshadowing throughout the seasons of each character and what they're going to go through and how they're going to do things. I mean, they even have a character that is dedicated to telling prophecies, but everyone thinks that she's just crazy. In reality, her little riddles and rhymes are what's going to happen in that entire episode. It makes for rewatching things a lot more enjoyable if you wanted to go back and rewatch it and just see all the little things that they put in there. So it's definitely much more appreciative, and I could say that it helped out a lot. As for the CGI, I mean, the dragons look as good, if not sometimes worse, than in Game of Thrones. It was okay. I was surprised that, I don't know, I just feel like maybe this being kind of like their flagship show again, maybe it's not. I guess I thought the dragons, we'd see more of the dragons, but I'm sure they're just real expensive. However, there were some episodes where it didn't even matter however much money they spent on the dragon CGI, because it was so dark, I couldn't see a thing. I mean, I'm watching the show at night with all the lights off, curtains drawn and everything, just so I can catch some movement going across my TV screen. That's how dark some of these episodes were, and it took me out of the immersion, the experience entirely. I don't know what was up with that, but they need to fix their lighting. I'm sure it was, if I think about it, it was just like 2-3 episodes, but it definitely was just, I was just like, no, this isn't okay. Every time there was nighttime, I was out. I was like, I don't want this anymore. But all in all, everything went well. The story felt tense. Every time I felt like they couldn't top themselves, or there's no way, like that's the peak of the show right there. That's the best. They did something else. They kept on going, and I definitely do see this as like, you know, Game of Thrones had big shoes to fill. I mean, it was something that everybody watched. Everybody watched Game of Thrones, and it ended in a way that everybody disliked. So I think the expectations were doubled on House of Dragons, and I feel like they stepped up. I feel like they really came to the plate and showed everyone, you know, what's to come, and I hope to see more of this. Probably a little less of the time skipping, maybe marinate the characters a little more. But with this character-driven show just doing so well so soon, I already want to recommend it, and I gotta say, it's an 8 out of 10. It showed me something different, showed me something new, and I really appreciate what's to come. Even though the time skips did hurt it, and I feel like some of the cinematography, I don't know, is lighting considered cinematography? I'm just gonna say lighting's considered cinematography, was poor. I think it's definitely something I would recommend to people if anyone asks me. So, tell me what your thoughts were of the show. I'd love to hear from them. I'd love to see those comments down below. And until next time, play nice.